Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me here today as I present to you Caregivers, One Mother's Journey. My name is Patti Joubert. Hi, my name is Patti Joubert, and I'm the Vice President of the Active Minds AMU-APU chapter. I'm here today because I'm a mom, a wife, and a mental health care advocate. I didn't get to this place because I'm a mental health care professional or a student studying psychology. I'm here as a caregiver to a husband who is a veteran with PTSD and my daughter who has bipolar disorder. Additionally, I've been around mental health disorders my entire life. Honestly, most of those went undiagnosed or untreated at the time. In my generation, in the 1970s and 80s, treatments were nothing like they are today. Effective medications were in their infancy, and treatments for mental health disorders given to previous generations in mental institutions included archaic and cruel procedures that left men and women, my parents' generation, less than willing to seek any type of help for mental health issues. Adolescents of my generation, Generation X, they were the first to become the independent latchkey generation. We were outdoors from sunup to sundown. I think that's because our parents just really didn't want to see us. We learned to take care of ourselves from an early age. And due to the lack of mental health care, coupled with our parents' mistrust of the whole system, we learned our own ways to cope with mental health issues. Not that they were always healthy ways, but if you study anything about Generation X, we are strong and we are a unique generation. Now, when you're dealing with bipolar disorder, it's a very difficult mental health disorder to recognize over typical teenage hormonal changes and rebellious tendencies and other more benign problems. Well, every parent would most likely state that they would absolutely know if something like this were wrong with their child. From my own experience, it begins in such an innocuous manner that it can easily be explained away. In my daughter's situation, she was dealing with several traumas that most adults could not handle. Therefore, it was easy to excuse the angry outbursts and her depressed mood. What I found out is there's more than one type of bipolar, and although many symptoms are similar, there are differences in varying degrees of severity between patients. So this is an important distinction because no two persons with disorder can be adequately compared. Bipolar types. I've added this slide about the different types of bipolar disorder. There's evidently 5, and it comes from a website that I've included on the last slide in the resource section. That website has a plethora of information from the different types of bipolar to the symptoms, and because there's more than one type, your loved one might have one type, my loved one might have a different one. They have different varying degrees and so forth. So you can't judge one person by another person's symptoms or lack of symptoms. So one person can't say, oh, well, I don't think your child really has bipolar because my child or my loved one has it and your child doesn't have the same symptoms as mine. There's different types. They all present differently and different degrees. So it's not a one size fits all type of disorder. So here is some information that I presented here for you to look at, and the site that it came from is listed on the resource page on the last slide. The bipolar symptoms are also listed on here, and they again were found in the same place that I have on the resource page from the same website. And these are pretty standard no matter where you're going to go to try to look up bipolar symptoms. You're going to find them in the same spot. What changes is each patient, which symptoms that they're going to manifest, and for how long each episode lasts. Um, Manic, hypomanic episodes, the length of time that they last, how often they last. This is where the different diagnoses are going to come in. The depressive episodes, which symptoms, how many of each symptom, and how long they last. So this is absolutely 100% a mood disorder. Um, it goes back from manic to depressive, and then it has periods in between where they're neither the high nor the low. They can be just normal, and that length of time in between varies. So there's a lot of information, like I said, on that page. I've given it in the back, and I myself am eager to have the time to be able to really go through and read more of what that page had to offer. The best thing that you can do for your loved one or for yourself is read as much as you can about the diagnosis, about the disorder, because knowledge is power. When you know what symptoms are, when you know the triggers, when you know what you're looking for, you can head off problems before they start. And that's really important, especially if you're the one with the diagnosis. And that's a lot of what they teach when you go for these therapies like behavioral cognitive therapy, learning to identify your own symptoms rather, and triggers is a key to being able to help yourself in not having these extreme highs and lows. And that's a really great way to becoming mentally healthy. I want to tell you a little bit about the trauma that I alluded to with Melodie, and um, the reason why when her symptoms started, a lot of things we were easily able to excuse. And it's because when Melodie was 15, we took her for her yearly eye exam, and every year she'd been getting more nearsighted, but this time she'd lost something more than we honestly, now we don't believe she's ever fully had. Melodie had lost a percentage of her peripheral vision enough that she was now categorized as legally blind. And so right before she should have been getting driving lessons as we had planned, she was instead being forced to participate in a summer program with the Lighthouse for the Blind. And I use the word forced because to receive aid for such items as Zoom text for the computer and other college aids, the student has to first go through this program. And so that year, the world that had been at her doorstep, she was 15 and she was beginning college in the fall. She had early admissions. And with her grades, she could choose anything to pursue. And in the blink of an eye, her world closed in and became a tunnel, much like her vision. And so we went to every type of specialist in Florida, and they ran every test they could think of, and not one could find the cause. So we carried on, but we were heartbroken for her, and she was heartbroken, and it, it didn't end there. Melodie began having worsening joint pains and issues, and other unexplained weird medical issues, such as feeling faint when she was in the shower and when she bent over and stood up too quickly. So we took her to my rheumatologist. We thought the joint pain, here we go. She's going to end up with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Well, no. What she has is hypermobility syndrome form of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And the rheumatologist believes that that is why she's lost her peripheral vision. Since then, she's also been diagnosed with a condition called POTS, or posterior orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And that is a condition that basically comes when you have EDS. So a lot of things happened between the time she was 15 and 18. So if you had an angry outburst or you were in a bad mood, well, I think I would be too if all these things started happening to me. So this slide I added in, it's just a little bit about what EDS is and what POTS is. And EDS there's different forms of it, and basically what it comes down to is a lack of collagen in the body. And collagen is that protein and acts like a glue. It adds strength and elasticity to your connective tissue. So because she doesn't have that, it's dwindling. Every year she gets older, she has less and less. And what happens is she could roll over in bed or get out of bed and her hip could sublux or dislocate. And it's very painful. And a sublux is just basically when your joint, your limb is partway out of joint, and dislocation is when it comes fully out of joint. And so that causes, eventually over time, it's going to cause severe arthritis in those joints. She gets skin tears where the skin literally tears, and it's painful. She has problems. People with this condition, they get a lot of sprains because as your joints are popping out, they strain the muscles and the ligaments around them. The POTS is one of the things that's listed there on signs and symptoms of EDS, and we already know she has that. You end up with gastroenteritis problems because your organs are made up of this elastic connective tissue, and it cannot push the food through your system. You can end up with other problems with your organs just not staying where they belong within your body. It's called prolapse, where they can eventually just let go and end up in differing positions where they don't belong. So she has things that can happen, things that have already happened. She also deals with vitamin deficiencies that make her very, very tired because she cannot absorb the vitamins into her body. So this has been because of the blood vessels and the vessels in her body are a problem without this collagen. The POTS, this causes fatigue, shortness of breath, dizziness, sweating, and it's because her blood pressure, she stands up too quickly, her blood pressure just drops and makes her feel like she's going to pass out, or she actually can pass out. So she has to eat small meals and more meals. She has to drink a lot of fluids. She has to eat salty things. She can't stand for long periods of time. She can't climb stairs. She can't climb a ladder. She can't stand on a chair. She can never drive a car. So had she not lost her eyesight, she would have lost her license anyway and not been able to drive. But now she cannot do a lot of things that most people can. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to be told. And so the depression, the irritability, some of the things that are the beginning signs that begin to happen when you are late teens, early adult, signs that begin to pop up of bipolar, we just explained away. I'd have a lot of those problems if I were going through the trauma and the disappointments that she was going through. So while dealing with such big issues, Melodie's mental health began to rapidly decline. But we tried to treat her the same because we didn't want her to think that we were or would treat her any differently because she was going blind. She graduated from the local college with her AA in liberal arts with highest honors. And in the fall, she moved away to college to begin a degree she really didn't want. What she wanted, she had to give up. And so with all that was beginning to spiral, everything at first was understandable under the circumstances. And she hadn't hit the extremes, and thankfully she never did. But the reason that she never hit these extremes that some kids, some young adults get into is because she couldn't drive. So it was a silver lining in a lot of respects. She never went out to the clubs with friends drinking. She's really an introvert, so she never got into doing that. We never had to worry about her driving a car and the issues that can come with that. We never had to worry about her being very sexually promiscuous because she was home a lot, because of the EDS and the problems that presented with that. And with her other medical issues, there were things that she just didn't do that other teens kind of get into when they have bipolar. I have a niece that is 6 years older than Melodie, who has her independence, and has two children because of the sexual promiscuity, who has gotten multiple tickets from her driving, not not following the laws, um, who has gotten into illegal drugs. So the things that can happen, we luckily haven't. So as I get a little bit more into the next phase of this, I just want you to know that our happy story and our happy endings and so forth, I'm well aware of how blessed I am that we did not have the extremes. So if you're dealing with a child, an adult, a young adult, yourself, you're going through a lot, I'm well aware of the extremes that can happen. We did not have them happen, but it's because of these things that they're not diseases, but they're disorders there that befell onto Melodie that really were silver linings. They were traumas, but they were still silver linings. So jumping ahead, after she had a bad experience at that one college, and she transferred to another to try a different program. And that semester, it was just another unsuccessful start, and she could pass the classes just fine, but living in a shared apartment and trying for independence had just awakened the sleeping beast within her. Anxiety and depression battled within her, and she began to use alcohol and prescribed meds to try to make it stop. And she agreed to see a psychiatrist, and he put her on medications, but he didn't diagnose her quite properly, and she was not ready to fully open up to a therapist or anyone about what she was experiencing within her own mind. So, after one semester at that college, Melodie took a year away from school to focus on her health, and both physical and mentally. She also needed to find a field that she liked that she could do with a visual impairment before going to another college or university. By now, she was just wasting money in college and was in a state of mental crisis. So much so that it was manifesting physically. And the more it did, the more anxiety she had until she ended up in the hospital with muscle jerking and cramping in her legs, hands, and face. And because of the EDS, doctors thought it was neurological, but it wasn't. It was a stress response. And we know that now. You see, when these kids, or any adult, we get them to go see a psychiatrist, but the thoughts they're having in their head, especially if they're depressed, nobody wants to admit what they're really thinking. They're afraid of being put in a hospital. They'd be afraid of being put in some kind of mental institution because they see these movies, they see these TV programs, they hear the way that mental patients are spoken about, and they're afraid of being labeled the same way. They're afraid of the stigmas. They're afraid of what their friends are going to think. So they don't want to speak up. They don't want to say about these thoughts that keep invading their minds. They don't understand that these thoughts are normal. These thoughts will go away. But Hollywood and TV programs, they harm our society by the things that they put out there about people who have mental health disorders. And a lot of that comes from the way that it was treated back before in the 20s, 30s, 40s, back then when we had mental health institutions and the archaic ways that it was treated. And then when they closed the mental health institutions and there was no solution on how to treat people and people were not, had nowhere to go, that made it worse too. So now you might be able to get your loved one to go seek medication, but they're not going to open up fully about what's going on inside them because they're scared. They're scared of the stigma and they're scared about being put in a hospital. So the more that we put out this message of stopping a stigma, the more information that we can get out there, the more advocacy we can all do, the better we can make it for that next patient and for the one after that. That not only will they seek medication, but they'll seek therapy, that they'll open up and tell the doctor, they'll tell somebody what's going on inside them earlier, so they'll get help earlier. An underserved and broken system. Finding mental health doctors can be the most difficult part. Many are either not accepting new patients, or they don't treat adolescents, depending on how old your child or loved one is when you call, or they're booked up for so many months ahead and you need them now. So we continued to go to the same doctor that she began with when she was in college, even though he was over an hour away, and he really didn't seem to be helping her properly. She certainly wasn't diagnosed properly. But in our desperation, some help was far better than no help. Melodie was hospitalized twice within 2 months at our local hospital. No changes were made to her meds and no one counseled her. She was just released in less than 24 hours and she got worse. At this point, she began to think she was fine and that the problem wasn't even her. It clearly had to be us because they weren't making changes to her meds and they weren't giving her counseling. They were just basically babysitting her. So if it wasn't her, then the other people in the equation were us. By this point, our marriage could barely take any more. As a mother, I couldn't give up on my child. And in my husband's eyes, she was no longer a child and needed to live by our rules or live somewhere else. It was for her own good. At this point, for Melodie's privacy, I won't go into detail about every issue we encountered to say, except that there were many fights. And the therapist that she was going to was clearly not the right one. And she agrees with me on that assessment. So at this point, we had to drop the hammer, so to speak. We insisted that she sign a roommate agreement. It defined our rules and also gave her some concessions and compromises for her. But she knew if she didn't live by the agreement, she was going to have to leave. Well, it took one more hospitalization to finally get her the proper meds, diagnosis, and referral to services that she needed. Of course, we smartened up this time and we took her to a better hospital. At this point, I want to tell you all, don't give up. If you take her to if you go to one hospital, you take your loved one there and they don't get the help they need, you go to a different one. If you go to a doctor and that doctor's not working, you find a different one. And the same with a therapist. Sometimes they don't click with one, or in Melodie's case, she went to 2 different men. She was never going to open up to a man. And they were not doing the type of therapy she needed for bipolar disorder. They were just sitting and chatting with her. She said one talked to her about Game of Thrones, the other about Doctor Who. They were wasted sessions about nonsense. They were not helping her. Well, we're getting there. We finally got to where we needed to be and getting the help she needed. But we had to keep being persistent. And I hope that who's listening to this today, you will be persistent too. We hit the jackpot. And we got results. Now, this slide here, I put this in, safeguarding your loved one from harm. Locks for closet doors, such as this one, you can find on Amazon. You could probably find them in Lowe's, Home Depot, and other places. These are an excellent way to safeguard items, medication, weapons, valuables, any other items in your home that you want to lock away to keep your loved one safe. We purchased a doorknob that was similar to this one, except the keypad is actually on the doorknob, because we have medications that are controlled substances in the home, and we have everything locked inside a walk-in closet. We also have weapons in our home, and we have the weapons in secured lock boxes, but we have another layer of protection because the lock boxes are also inside the closet. Also not a bad idea, because if our house were ever broken into, not only do they have to try to break into the doors, they'd also have to try to break into a closet before they could get to any valuables or anything. So we have layers and we have barriers put in way, so it keeps robbers away from our stuff, keeps my daughter away from things. Now that she's better, we still keep things locked up, but it's not as much of a necessity as much as we felt it was when we first put it in. That being said, when we go away and she's home alone when we're on vacation, we still keep the door locked, because we never know what's going to happen when we're gone. Something could happen that could set off either mania or depression with her, and we're not home, and we would never want anything to happen to her in a moment of weakness. These locks are wonderful because you can pick the code to unlock it, and they do not, if you're in the closet and the door closed, you can easily get out. It only locks from the outside with the code, and only whoever has the code can get into your closet. You can obviously use them on another door besides a closet. So if you wanted to use them on, say, a private bathroom, and you had things locked in there, or whatever door you wanted to use on, I personally like it on my closet. So like I said, this one goes for about $45. They're all in $45 to $55 range. So after Mel's third and final hospitalization, Christmas week of 2018, we started making progress. That was the key, that third trip. And I can tell you, as a mother, one of the toughest moments I ever had was dropping her off on the night of December 21st. But we just desperately wanted our bubbly, happy daughter back. And as it was an hour home, and I just prayed. I prayed for God's grace all the way home, and I can tell you, He sent it in the form of a woman named Kelly. And when the social worker called that time, by the time the next morning came, the social worker called, and I told her about Mel's history, and I told her we would not take her back in 24 hours. We wanted her to be kept for the whole 72 and to be truly evaluated. And that they can't do in 24 hours. She needed to be evaluated. She needed the proper diagnosis. She needed the proper meds, because she wanted desperately to get better, and nobody was helping her. So they did what I asked, and they kept her. And while she was there, this wonderful woman, Kelly, she took a motherly watch over my child. And as Mel described, if you watched her video that she did for you all, her presentation, she finally let down her guard and she opened up to someone, and that someone was Kelly. And once she did, she realized if she could talk to a stranger, she could finally open up to a therapist. And because she did that, and because Kelly listened and took that motherly care with her, she could now finally get the help that she needed. So to this day, Miss Kelly is on my Facebook. She's on Melodie's, and I consider her a guardian angel because she watched over Melodie when she was there. Her and there was another older woman, and they made sure nothing happened to my girl while she was there. One thing that we learned, which you all not going to believe, but there was a whole center, a whole new center for mental health care that had opened on the exact same road as the other hospital that we had been to. It was affiliated with the other hospital, and it was a mile down the road. We were never told it was there. We were never referred to it. It was like it didn't exist to these people. So she had been in the ward, in the mental health ward, for about 24 hours. They never said a mile down the road is Baycare Mental Health. You can go there and go through the intake process where you can be evaluated for therapy and placed with a therapist, and there are doctors there who can treat you. Nope. They heard she had a psychiatrist in Orlando, so they never bothered. This is a broken system. So she went for intake. She was evaluated and placed with a trauma therapist because she had experienced trauma. When you are diagnosed as going blind, when you are diagnosed with chronic incurable diseases before you're even 18, that is trauma. Finding the proper therapist that you can connect to and who specializes in what you need makes a huge difference. She was placed with a new psychiatrist, and when you go to a facility such as this, your psychiatrist can see your notes from your therapy. Your therapist can see your notes from going to see your psychiatrist. Everybody's on the same page, and you have a care plan where it's a whole wonderful thing, because now she can get a proper diagnosis. And if she's having issues, her diagnosis can be evaluated. Her medications can be tweaked if necessary. So we started on the right track. In the beginning of 2019, we really began a new beginning. And she started cognitive behavioral therapy. And when she went to therapy, she took it seriously. Her therapist said she never saw somebody bring a notebook and a pen. But in my daughter's eyes, if she was going to go to therapy, she was going to get the most out of it. And if she was going to be given homework or things to work on, she needed to remember what the therapist told her to do. So she brought her notebook and she took her notes, and she was given things to work on. And finally, her and I began to have real dialogue. She took her meds, and they did their job, and the therapy helped her to not only understand her disorder, but to work out the issues about everything that had happened to her, and to work through her anger, and to work through her disappointment about everything the blindness had caused her to lose. And this is a picture of my baby girl. In May of 2019, the three of us, her father and she and I, we went to Paris, France for 2 weeks. And that big smile shows, as I told her, she got her muchness back. And anybody who has seen the movies or read the books of Alice in Wonderland, they know what getting your muchness back really means, and it's a big deal. But the year before, we had gone to England with her sister, and it was a much different trip. Melodie was in the throes of bipolar, um, the symptoms and the things that she did on that trip um, were unbelievable. I'll leave it at that, but it was not a very enjoyable trip for three of us with her. But now we agreed to have her come to Paris with us, and we had a wonderful trip, the three of us. So this is a picture, one of the pictures of her. And this picture here is myself and her father and her. We had hired a professional photographer for an hour who took pictures of us outside the Eiffel Tower, and her father and I remarried outside the Eiffel Tower because it was our 25th wedding anniversary. And Mel got to be there with us. And then this is a picture near where we stayed in the Latin Quarter, and Mel and I with our umbrellas enjoying our stroll. So, and she was, I don't think there was a day she didn't have a beautiful smile on her face the whole time we were there. Now, we had to work on building trust again. So throughout 2019 and into 2020, Melodie, her father, and I, we worked on building trust. And this isn't the kind of trust that, if I leave money out, she's not going to take it, or other possessions. And, that is one thing that I know people with their children have had issues with stealing and so forth. We didn't go through that, but we knew that a few of her accidents in 2017, 2018 timeframe had been misguided attempts at self-harm. And she had abused alcohol and prescribed medications to dull the unrelenting symptoms due to the mis and undiagnosed conditions that she had. Well, now we needed to trust that she was following what her therapist was suggesting for her, and she wanted to be healthy, and that she was doing the work. So I monitored her, but I didn't want to hover, and I watched over her. I still had that mother's fear inside me every day when I went to wake her up, and I prayed for her every night. And as 2019 progressed, slowly and steadily, we were getting our daughter back. She learned how to make sure to take her medications on time by using alarms. She knew she had to go to bed about the same time every night, and she refrained from alcohol. Her behavioral cognitive therapy made the world of difference, because medications alone cannot fully treat this disorder to the maximum benefit that can be achieved. Bipolar disorder, if left untreated, can destroy one's life up to and including death. If treated with medications and therapy, they can lead a healthy, full, productive life. And with a trusted advocate and caregiver and a plan in place, the person with bipolar is less likely to have severe episodes. Behavioral therapy teaches the patient to recognize their symptoms and understand the triggers of depression. And that's so true. Mel knows now when something's triggering her, and she's starting to go into a depression. And she can use the tools that she's been given so that she doesn't fall into a deep depression, so that she can start to bring herself out of it. For example, in November, her cat died. And that was starting to send her to spiral into a depression. We had had Belle since she was a kitten. And Belle was a very special member of our family, as are all our cats. And Belle got sick, and it went very quickly. She was only 12. She wasn't that old, and it wasn't expected. And Belle was her baby, and Belle had helped her when she was first depressed. So this was tough, and Belle died in her arms. So she knew that that was a trigger, and she felt that she was becoming depressed. She saw the signs that she didn't feel like getting out of bed, that she didn't feel like getting dressed, that she was displaying the signs. And she was able to work her way out of it. And she learned this because of going to therapy. She sees when she starts to become manic and she starts to realize that she's shopping a little bit more. She's getting a little bit where she's planning out a bunch of projects and she's getting a little bit too ahead of herself. She's noticing different signs now that she's able to kind of slow it down. So the therapy is a wonderful tool to help manage this disorder. And you have to be willing to put yourself, make yourself, out there, vulnerable, ready to talk and ready to do the work with a therapist. But it's so worth it in the end, because then you can have this wonderful, productive life. Having a plan. Melodie takes care of her medication with my help as needed. As each year passed, she took on more responsibilities with her own healthcare needs. Now at almost 25, she takes care of all her own needs. I step in if needed as her advocate when pharmacies or even doctors give her a difficult time. She uses alarms on her watch to remind her to take her various medications. Melodie doesn't only have to consider bipolar meds, which have to be taken at the same time each day. She also has medication that controls her heart rate and blood pressure, so she doesn't pass out randomly. I taught her how to handle her banking, pay bills, and look at insurance statements. She's learning how to speak up for her rights and needs with doctors, and she only has me there for support if needed. We've begun planning for when she moves out on her own. We started by identifying some of the pitfalls that can happen to those with bipolar disorder, such as forgetfulness and spending sprees. Agreeing to a plan ahead of time to address these possible issues prior to them happening is one way to ensure that Melodie's successful future. Exhibiting and keeping trust, working on a two-way relationship with trust and respect, and by advocating for her and helping to ensure her success is about being on her team. She needs to know she can count on me, and I need to know I can trust her. I also need to know she is there when I need her. Sometimes I need help too. Getting these plans in place helps ensure that when she goes out on her own, all the work we've done, all the work she's done, doesn't all become unraveled. It's scary when you go out on your own and you don't have the safety net anymore. And it's scary for us knowing that she's no longer here, that we can make sure that she's safe. But if we all work together and we're all on the same team, we can ensure that no matter where she is, she's still doing everything she needs to do to remain safe and to remain successful. And that's what matters the most. So now a word about the caregivers. We've talked so far about caring for a child with bipolar, and I've told you my story about my daughter. So throughout this journey with Melodie, and so much happened that I could literally fill an entire day with the presentation. And as a mother and a caregiver, it was so easy to forget to stop and care for myself. And I'm sure that there's a lot of mothers out there and caregivers who have done the same thing. Well, right around the time that we got Melodie's diagnosis for her eyes, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And her father had been diagnosed the year before as permanently disabled. And her sister, well, we'd been taking care of her with juvenile diabetes since she was 5. That's just the life that we had. I learned over this period that I could be their mom, and I could be his wife, and their advocate and caregiver, but I couldn't be the therapist. I went wrong for years, allowing my oldest large amounts of time, taking me away from Melodie and listening to things she really should have been talking to a therapist about. But when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, they never included mental health care as part of the overall care plan. In hindsight, it was very much needed by the time she was 7. Caregivers don't take time for themselves. They take on the stress in ways they don't readily recognize. And although it was only formally diagnosed in 2013, I had had RA flare-ups for several years. RA is an autoimmune disease, but it worsens with stress. And mine flourished on it. By 2013, when the test finally showed a positive result, it was nearly 400 points above normal. Over the years, I had gained weight steadily as well. And my excuse was that, well, I ate what the girls ate. So if they had mac and cheese, so did Mom. Mom had grilled cheese. The truth was really that I used food as a distraction and a crutch, just as I had my entire life. Once I decided to take some time for me and to get healthy, I lost the weight. It took years to finally lose enough to get close to my goal, but I took time to change old habits and mindsets. It took me time to undo bad habits that had started in childhood and mindsets that my parents had started when we were kids sitting at the table told to finish our plates. So it's okay that it was a slow journey. I still got there. Now, there are things I know I can't do for either of my daughters, and they have to do for themselves. They're adults now, and I understand that. Although they're my children, they're not children. And I can't be their therapist. I can give them hugs. I can be a good listener, but I can't solve their problems for them. Some words of wisdom. Along the years, I think as mothers, we all come up with our little sayings and things that we say that we kind of, as we get older, we think, that was a good nugget of information I came up with. Well, here are 4 things I put here that I think as caregivers of people with either chronic diseases or mental health disorders might benefit from. The first one is something that I told my girls when they were young. It came about in a conversation about their dad. They were kind of upset that he had been grumpy and angry for some time, and they kind of didn't know how to react anymore. So I explained to them that sometimes when someone is sick or they're hurt or they're going through a crisis, they may act mean or angry when they don't intend to be. And they don't want to be hurtful towards you. They're just hurting. So in those times, we just need to give them more love and more understanding than maybe you think they deserve, but it's what they need. And it's what God wants us to do. So you have to think to yourself that, okay, well, today's Dad's day to be loved more. So it just ended up being shortened down to, it's Dad's turn to be loved more today, if he was a grump. And when it was Melodie's turn, when she was going through some tough times, and she was grumpy or she was sad or she was angry, then it was Melodie's turn to be loved more, and so on. So you may think of that mindset when you're having difficult times either with yourself or with your loved one, then maybe that person just needs to be loved more. More understanding, more love. They may be kind of prickly. They may not feel they always deserve it, but as a mom and as a caregiver, it's what you need to do. And it does work. My second one here is that we moved to Florida in 2006, and for us, we moved here because we didn't want to move back north where it was cold, and we decided we were going to move to Florida. We were going to live near the parks so I could work for one of them, and we could enjoy playing at the parks whenever we decided we wanted to. And we did. I went to go work for Walt Disney World, and we had tickets, and when life seemed to be very stressful and we wanted to escape, and take mental health day, we did. And my husband and I used to tell our kids, life doesn't always have to be so hard. And we would take a Disney day. And now, while I understand that everyone can't escape to Disney, everyone can find their happy place. And so, whether you enjoy gardening or going to the movies or going to the beach or in a park near your home, find your happy place. And when you need to escape, when you need to get away from the stress and everything that's starting to build up, find a day that you can just escape from everything and go to your happy place. And you forget about everything that's going on at home, the chores, the bills, the problems, and go enjoy your day. Because you can come back with a much better perspective after you've let it go for a while. My next one here is we found out that when you have a pet, for us it's cats, they can give you the greatest source of unconditional love. And no matter how you're feeling when you come home or who you have around you, when you have a pet, whether it's your dog or your cat, when you're suffering, they are the greatest love and source of joy that you can have. So in 2006, we felt, well, the kids needed a pet. We had told them when we moved back to the mainland, and when we got settled, we would get them a cat. So we got them Tigger. And we found out pretty quickly that cats choose their human. And because Tigger chose me, we then adopted 2 kittens, Belle and Cleopatra. And what we discovered was that the cats chose the girls, and my husband had no cat. In 2011, my husband then ended up finding an abandoned calico kitten who we named Beatrice. And Beatrice has been his cat since day one. She still worships him, as a matter of fact, 11 years later. So Belle, in Melodie's worst depression, refused to leave her side. Even though Melodie pushed her away, Melodie at times tried to hide under the covers to get away from her, Belle refused to leave her side. When I was at my sickest and I was first diagnosed with RA, Tigger refused to leave my side. And Beatrice, she refuses to leave David's side. She is with him always. She sits on his lap. She keeps him calm. And she has been a source of unconditional, devoted love to him since the day he rescued her. We have since added to our family of cats. We have 8. We've lost a couple along the way, and we've replaced them because they need a home, and we need that love and joy in our home. And my last bit of information just came from experience. If any of you out there are caretakers of a child or a loved one with bipolar disorder or any other mental health disorder, I am sure you can relate to this. If your child has bipolar disorder and you have never flipped them off when they have stormed out of the room, have they really been diagnosed properly? Just asking. We included pictures of the first 4 babies that we have gotten. There have been others now since, but Tigger and Belle and Cleopatra and Beatrice, they were our first sources of the most beautiful unconditional love you can imagine. Tigger and Belle have since gone over the Rainbow Bridge, and Miss Cleo just turned 12, and Beatrice is 11. And we have since added to our family we just got 2 new kittens. But I think I will always save and rescue cats because they keep my husband calm and they keep us entertained. Learning to let the therapist do her job. There is no reason to adjust this slide. Yes, those pictures are of the same woman. When I learned to let the therapist do her job and to take care of myself, big changes happened. That woman on the right is what I used to look like in 2012 and before, and I'd actually looked like that for a long time. I really looked in the mirror and I hated the way I looked, and I spent so much time trying to take care of everyone else and trying to listen to my daughter's troubles and honestly a sister who has mental health issues that I didn't take care of myself. When I finally started taking care of myself, I found out that I could be a better caretaker for my daughter, a better mom for my daughter, a better wife, and I feel like a better person myself. So the new picture on the left is me now. And that picture was taken just a few months ago. And I'm a much healthier person and a much happier person now. So Melodie and I have bonded over shopping trips and makeup, and I can now go on roller coasters again. And her and I have a great time when we go to the parks. We can go on roller coasters and rides, and we have rediscovered our mother-daughter relationship, being able to do that. And so if you are a caretaker out there, take a look at these pictures and realize that if you do not take care of yourself, it takes a huge, huge toll on you. It did on me. So let my story and my appearance be a warning. And these are some pictures that Mel picked out. It's her and her sister at Disney when, of course, when they were about 9 and 10 here, and the 2 of them being goofy. And this is when Mel graduated the first time from Polk State College. She got an associate's there the first time in liberal arts. She has since gotten her associate's in science this past year. She graduated there in May with her associate's in science and graphic design, and she is now going to Southern New Hampshire University for a bachelor's degree in graphic design. And this is her and I. We were in Paris that day. And this is her and I on our mother-daughter days. And we are Thelma and Louise. And she actually bought us shirts for our trip. We had gone and stayed at Universal Orlando for a few nights. And I took a picture of her. My shirt says she's my Thelma and hers says she's my Louise. And this is my girl. She was always smiling, happy, laughing. And she's got her smile back, and that's for sure. A lot of our days are spent at Universal. We have annual passes, so we do go there a lot. We spend our time going on rides and having fun going on the roller coasters, front row, and going to the Mardi Gras and the Halloween Horror Nights and the different things that they have going on there. And it's wonderful that we get to share that together now. That definitely would not have happened a few years ago. So on this last slide, I've listed some resources on here. The first is the 5 types of bipolar disorder on the website Very Well Mind. don't be fooled. That is not the only thing that is on that page, and there are links that lead to a plethora of information. I really can't wait to get some time to go back on that page and really dig in to the amount of information that is on there. The next one on there is calm.com, or the Calm app on your phone. They have some great soothing sleeping sounds, meditation sessions to help relieve stress, aid in a good night's sleep. I know we probably really need one. Those of us moms out there, I know I could use a good one. And then Mission 22. Mission 22, you're going to hear a lot about in the next year and so on going forward. The organization is for helping veterans and their families who struggle with mental health crises and suicide prevention. There are also resources on there for civilians who have not been in the military. One of them I highlight on here is a self-guided 28-day program called R&R Elements. It's for anyone interested in a science-based wellness program. It's free, open to civilians and veterans. Mission 22 is going to be a big part of Active Minds. As the Vice President of Active Minds, I'm going to be integrating and working with Mission 22 in the new year. And it's a wonderful organization. We're going to be partnering a lot with them. So stay tuned. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. And I really want to bring a lot more resources to be able to help everyone connect with the services that they need. And we really want to bring a lot more to our website to help our members and help the community to be able to find doctors, find services, and make it easier. You've heard my story. You've heard how hard it was for us to connect and find the proper treatments, the proper therapies. And I'm hoping that I can partner and find organizations where we can put up information to help you all have a much smoother journey. I want to thank you so much for listening and spending the time here with our symposium here today. I want to apologize for if my bumbling. I'm not the greatest orator. I will be the first one to admit that. But I'm very grateful that you listened to my story, the journey that my family has been through. It's not easy. It's very difficult for these young adults to walk this walk. It's a very cruel mental health disorder. It hits at the time of their lives where they should be in college, and their whole life is ahead of them. And when it hits, I can't imagine what goes through their heads. But if they have a good support system, if they take their medications, if they do the work, they learn about their disorder, there is no reason in the world why they cannot live a full and enriched life like anyone else. They're no different, and it's no different if they had a physical disease. There should not be a stigma, and we're going to do everything we can to do our part here at Active Minds to reduce that stigma, to educate and advocate so that we can make sure that these young adults and anyone out there can get the help that they need. So thank you again for joining us here today, and you all have a great weekend. Take care.